Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar, Becoming an Influential Woman in Tech, Defining Your Own Path to Success. I am Aaliyah Papala with Becker's Hospital Review. We will begin today's webinar with a presentation, and we'll have time at the end of the hour for a question and answer session. You can submit any questions you have throughout the webinar by typing them into the Q&A box you see on your screen. We are looking forward to hearing your questions. Today's session is being recorded and will be available after the event. You can use the same link you used to log into today's webinar to access that recording. At this time, I am pleased to turn the floor over to Kendall Harold to introduce today's speakers and begin the presentation.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited to start to have this conversation with everyone. I want to review quickly just a brief agenda. Today's webinar is really a panel discussion, just an open conversation between women who are working currently in the health tech care space. So we're going to get to a brief introduction, then we'll have the panel discussion followed by a Q&A. So we do want to encourage everyone to submit any questions or even just comments you have throughout today's discussion using the Q&A box. So today, here are our speakers. We're going to have each woman introduce themselves and give a brief introduction. So Nancy Phillips, I'll turn the floor over to you. Nancy, you may be on mute. While we figure that out, Katie, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself briefly?
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So hi, my name is Katie Allet. I've been with Ensemble for 3 years, and I've been in the healthcare space for 14. My background is in industrial engineering, and my career journey has always been finding roles that allows me to help solve problems. In that, I've been in healthcare throughout my entire career in various different industries inside of healthcare. I right now manage the automation and optimization team at Ensemble, which allows me and my team to be in a seat to break down problems and help develop solutions for our rev cycle experts. My current role has me working both with business operation leaders, but also a large part of my work is with tech. And I'm looking forward to the discussion today on how my journey has gotten me to my place in tech.
Thank you, Katie. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Alex Alaire. I joined Ensemble Health Partners in June of 2021 when Odessa was acquired by Ensemble, and that's the company that I was working at the time. In my role, I oversee all of the implementation and long-term technical support of Odessa's patient digital communication and engagement software across all of our customers. And so I'm very intricately involved in all of the software implementation work that we do, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Thank you, Alex. Maggie, can you please introduce yourself?
Great. My name is Maggie Stremmel. I am the leader of our customer success team at Janus Health. And I'm thrilled to be part of this panel with these inspiring leaders from Ensemble that I've met through our collaboration together. At Janus, we're on a mission to infuse intelligence into revenue cycle operations. And we do that through our process understanding and automation tools. We have an end-to-end platform in order to improve revenue cycle operations. We strive to empower revenue cycle leaders and workers to better decision-making through identifying continuous improvement opportunities and creating more efficient workflows. And I'm leading our customer success team, as I said. So what that means is I'm doing everything for all of our customer implementations and supporting them in both implementation and post-implementation.
Thank you, Maggie. Nancy, would you like to introduce yourself now?
All right, can you guys hear me?
You can.
It's hard to believe I'm a woman in tech, isn't it? No, I just want to thank everybody. I'm super excited to be here today. The Becker's team for hosting Kendall for being our moderator and the essential component to gathering this wonderful group of extraordinary women together. And I am humbled to be included in this discussion. As Kendall said, I am Nancy Phillips. I am currently the Chief Information Security Officer at Ensemble Health Partners. My role there is to protect the organization so it can do the business that it needs to do with revenue cycle management for our clients, those that we serve. I've been in the cybersecurity space through my entire career, which we'll get into a little bit more, probably more years than I hate to admit, and really have held a leadership role for more than half those years. Thanks, Kendall.
Great. Thank you, Nancy, and everyone else for sharing your background and how you kind of got to where you are today. We want to go to the next slide here. Before we dive into how each of these women have really defined their own path to success and how you can do the same, this is just a brief overview of where women in tech are now. And we thought this was kind of an encouraging slide. You can see in 2019, about 22.4% of women made up the workforce, and now we're at 25%. So a slow but steady increase. And again, just some inspiration to share today before we start the conversation. So we're going to get into the panel discussion. We have a few questions for each of our panelists today. The first one is, how did you start in tech? And is this the field you'd always intended to work in, or did you follow maybe a non-traditional career path to get to where you are today?
So one thing I want to go back to that other slide just for a second, or just comment towards it, because I had an opportunity to be in a classroom over the weekend for those that are studying for what we call the CISSP, the Certified Information Security System Security Professional, which is like the top level cert for those in the cybersecurity career field. And the encouraging part of that, going in just to help mentor students and encourage them to go down this career path, is half of the students were female and half male, and half the instructors were female and half male. So it was just encouraging to see that these stats are happening, you know, just in places everyday life, to see that there is an increase from what I might have seen, you know, years ago, going and serving at the same capacity, at the same type of classes. So it's very encouraging. But when we talk about my career, right, and how I got here, I'd say it seems non-traditional to most, but probably very traditional to those that are in cybersecurity. So like many people that are in cybersecurity, I started in the military for about 9 years in military intel, where you know, we were developing tactics and techniques against adversary, which is a very great basis for understanding on how to protect against threats. But I think the interesting part, and how I actually made the transition from, you know, doing more of the threat analytics. You know, after I was in the service, I went into defense contracting roles, very similar work that I was doing in the service. Was just after I had finished my bachelor's degree, the organization I was working for in Colorado was preparing for an audit. And so I went over there to help them. I had just gotten finished with my degree. I was excited to still be working on keyboards and helping them change file permissions and implement access control routers, control lists and routers, you know, things of that nature to help them prepare and pass this audit. What happened to me is the gentleman that was leading that group, you know, while we were going through this, just said, hey, you know what, you really have a knack for this. And if you're interested, we'll figure out a way to keep you here, and I'll mentor you in this new career field called information security. And really, if it hadn't been for him, you know, just seeing, you know, that there was some skill there and investing his time to develop that skill, I wouldn't have had this extraordinary career that I've had in cybersecurity.
Great, thank you for sharing that. Katie, would you like to chime in as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a totally different path than Nancy, but I think it's similar notes. So being an industrial engineer, took a regular industrial engineering path. I wanted to be in healthcare, didn't know what I wanted to do in healthcare, and loved, like I said in my intro, kind of solving problems. And so when I entered into the healthcare world fresh out of school, I joined healthcare when they were in the early 2000s, going through the journey of meaningful use, implementing electronic medical records inside of healthcare institutions. And I was in a quality role. So looking how people did their jobs today and how we would be changing the way people worked when they moved from manual and paper processes into an electronic process. So this has allowed me to dive deep into how nurses worked, how providers worked, how we would do things on the rev cycle. So I was able to kind of speak through all of the various different workflows, and then at the same time went through a journey of understanding the software that would be implemented. And so I had a similar path to Nancy, where as I went through and understood the work that was happening, there were leaders and mentors around me that were looking and seeing the critical thinking skills, the ability to break down problems and then solution. And I also was kind of tapped on the shoulder, hey, there is a huge industry in software development for healthcare. Is this be something that you would be interested in? And from there, I always kind of lived in IT, even though I was more in the forefront of collaborating between operations and IT. So I had a non-traditional path to get there, but through my journey kind of led me through quality, process improvement, continuous improvement, and then landed kind of at the table with a lot of people that had technical and software development skills.
Great, thank you for sharing. Maggie, would you like to share with this one too?
Yeah, absolutely. My experiences are pretty similar to Katie and Nancy in the sense that I spent about majority of my career, about 10 years prior to joining Janus, in a professional services revenue cycle consulting performance improvement firm. And during that time, I really doubled into the technical side of the work we were doing. It was something that interested me. So I spent time figuring out how can I do more of that type of role. I started small with kind of just learning what the different language was and how that fit into specifications, how that translated into our tools. And that culminated in a role where I was a functional stakeholder for an internal tool that I was just helping to develop. So I've really spent a lot of my career on that convergence between problem solving for clients and putting tools into place to solve those problems. And I got to that more technical side. Really, I've always been interested in how technology can solve problems for revenue cycle. So I got to that through doubling back on what can I learn and how can my own skill set help me to feel comfortable with those conversations.
Great, thank you all for sharing. That brings us to our second question. Talking about imposter syndrome, I know this is an issue that many of us, both inside and outside of the tech space, have to deal with every now and then. Has it been an issue for you, or maybe how have you overcome it?
Yeah, thanks, Kendall. I can kick this one off. So for me personally, on my journey, it was all about building confidence, and that really started with building confidence within myself. I felt like I needed to prove to myself that I deserved to have a seat at the table before I was ready to convince others of that. And so how did I go about doing that and building that confidence? I knew that having experience and continuous practice would go a really long way to build me up to a place where I was comfortable and confident to have a seat at the table. And so that's ultimately why I made the decision that I did to join Odessa as an early stage startup as one of their first employees, because I saw that as such a valuable opportunity for me to grow, regardless of how successful the company was going to be, or how many clients we were going to have, or anything like that. I saw it as an opportunity to invest in myself and to take on these experiences and these challenges that a lot of people at my level in my career would not have had the opportunity to do. And that was ultimately on my journey to have a seat at the table, or even build the table as I go, to feel like I was confident in being able to do that. So, throughout that process, it can be tough because at times I need to remind myself that, it's okay if things don't go exactly how I wanted them to. And that's why, sometimes maybe I would shy away from something because I didn't know what the outcome was going to be or how it was going to turn out. But I really needed to remind myself that it's okay if things don't go perfectly when you take on new challenges, especially if it's your first time doing something. And if it doesn't go the way that you're expecting to, you have to give yourself grace and understand that that's all part of the experience. Another big part of this was never being afraid to ask questions or ask for help when I needed it. Going through an early stage startup that was growing quickly, you constantly need support from those around you, and it's okay to understand your limits and to show that you need support from others. And so ultimately, over time, these active efforts to grow my experience and take on challenges, I started to build confidence naturally, and I started to not feel like I was an imposter anymore. And once I really got to that place internally, it kind of just happened naturally. I feel like in my career where other leaders really started to see me as someone who deserves to be at the table, and they started to really value having me on the team and hearing what I had to say.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there, Alex. I think in my experiences, I've been able to overcome imposter syndrome or kind of talk myself out of it through those two things, right? So, recognizing what you're bringing to the table. And at times, as a woman or really any individual, you're coming with different background experiences and bringing something new to the conversation, to the project. So doubling back on what your own skills are to make sure that you feel like you're contributing, and then knowing your limits and asking for help, exactly like you said. I'm a huge fan of bringing other people into the room when it's not my area of expertise.
Great. Thank you both for sharing. I think that was really insightful. I do want to get back to the state of gender equity. It kind of goes back to the first slide that we shared and what Nancy shared in the beginning. Things are continuing to trend upward for women in healthcare tech. But how do you all view the current state of gender equity in your own personal experiences? And what would you say to encourage young women to pursue a career in tech?
Yeah, I mean, I really see it as an opportunity for us as women leaders in tech. I think there's a huge, Nancy's story is really inspiring me today because I think it's a big difference from the numbers that we saw earlier. But I see it as a way to inspire other young women and for them to kind of take some of our lessons and, help them to know if you just want to double back on learning different lingo or learning different opportunities, there's a lot of things out there. And for me, it's really just about empowering the opportunity and helping people to recognize that they're using technology every single day. So thinking about how that might apply to the different roles.
Yeah, I agree. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Alex. No, I just wanted to make one comment, to both of you and your stories, which is, going back to leaning on what you know. I mean, the gentleman that tapped me on the shoulder told me that knowledge is power, that no matter what you do, nobody can ever take that away from you. And so, knowing that, what is it that makes equality at the table? I think to your guys' points and your experiences and your wanting to, invest in yourself, that's part of the journey that helps, make things more equal across the genders.
Yeah, thanks for that, Nancy. Alex, did you have something you wanted to share as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you're thinking about pursuing a career in technology and you're a woman, I think it can be really powerful to build relationships with people in the industry that are leaders or mentors or people that you trust, because that's going to go a very long way. As long as you can show that you're knowledgeable and capable and you're willing to work hard, those relationships really do matter. And I think each of us at some point has had an experience where someone has helped us along the way to get to where we're at. And so if you know someone, or if you work with someone who has that, that can be really valuable to have that support system.
Yeah, and I think, Kendall, or Alex, to jump in here for you, I think that one of the things is that I think we're all a little bit scared of the word tech, because the word tech can be something that feels uncomfortable. And going back to Maggie's point, I think that we all forget sometimes how much technology we use every single day, right? So the ability for us to sign into this webinar today, we all had to check our mics and do tech, right? And the ability for us to get an Uber today is all through tech. And so we are using tech just in our daily lives so much more than we actually think. And I think that one of the things to think about as a woman thinking of coming into tech is you don't have to have a background in tech to be in tech, right? And I think we're learning that through this panel today, that many of us have had an untraditional journey through our seat at the table that we have now. And it's really about giving, like Alex said, the confidence in yourself to be a critical thinker. At the end of the day, all technology is solutions that solve problems. So if you can be a critical thinker, really getting the skill sets in tech, maybe something specific like cybersecurity or automation or process mining like the Janus team does, that comes naturally after the fact, right? Those are the things that you're going to go investigate and learn and continue your education. But getting a seat at the table is just having that confidence to get there and looking at people around that table that want to help you do that. And so I encourage people as we kind of go through this too, we're open to continuing to have that dialogue outside of this panel, because I think sometimes it's having that open dialogue with something just to build that confidence, like Alex said, that the decision you made was right. We are seeing, we're seeing good work with people, I think is really, really helpful.
Yeah, and I think to build on that, as leaders, the leaders that make, or the skill sets that make a strong leader, someone who invests back their time in other people, someone who, I was reading a recognition, I think just on LinkedIn, about how an HR leader was recognized for always taking the extra 30 minutes to describe something with their team, which as an HR leader, you could imagine they're getting pulled into a lot of different conversations. So I think what makes a strong leader is translatable across many industries. And so as women who have spent our careers in this field, I think we want to spend the time to invest that back into others. I know I had a couple unique opportunities early on at Janus that I didn't anticipate, just from having less women than I had worked with in my previous company, and them immediately coming to me and seeking advice. So folks that I didn't work with, didn't have a professional relationship, coming to me. And that was really cool and eye-opening. And I definitely took a lot of time to make sure I was understanding the situation fully and giving them the right advice, so that I could be in that person that they will come to again in the future. And that I can encourage people on my team and people across the industry to dive into what makes them happy.
And Maggie, I think what's really interesting there is your excitement that somebody reached out to you, right? And that's generally how people respond. So if you have this fear that, oh, I could never talk to that person, or they wouldn't, people are flattered when you reach out and say, hey, I would really love to spend a few minutes with you. I would love to know more about what you do and how you got there. So don't ever feel like you're intruding, or that, for some reason that you shouldn't do that. It's both ways. We as leaders, right? We need to tell each other to tap other people on the shoulder, but anybody, if you see somebody that you aspire to be like, let them know and have that conversation. It'll probably be the best thing you've ever done.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Nancy. I think that's great advice.
Yeah, that is definitely great advice. And while we're on the topic, I would encourage everyone in today's webinar to reach out to our panelists today. You can find them on LinkedIn. And if you actually go to the Ensemble Health Partners LinkedIn page, the very first post there, each of our panelists is tagged in that post. And I also want to remind everyone and encourage everyone, if you have any questions for the women right now, please utilize the Q&A function here in this platform. So that brings us to our next question. What or who has been an influence on each of you and helped you to get to where you are?
Kendall, I'll jump in here. So I think as I think through this question, it's so hard to pinpoint sometimes a specific person or specific instance that happened. But I think as I thought through preparing for this panel and through my experience, I've really thought about it as the journey. I've had multiple like non-traditional influences that have got me along this journey. And so my advice to the people listening to this call is that I think there's sometimes influences that are happening that aren't going to be apparent why they're happening now. And as you look back in your career, you'll understand why those pieces came together. And so as I've gone through my career, I never knew I'd end up in rev cycle automation. I've never in my life even knew how to build an automation or a bot, right? But what I've done is been in the right conversations at the right time, understanding the problems that needed to be solved and looking at ways to go solve them. So I think that when I look back and say, how did I get to automation at Ensemble? It kind of nothing pops up. But if I look through my career and understanding various different projects that I was on, various different people that I worked with, understanding how people that I was working across the table with and how they solved problems, how they critically thought, allowed me to get to a place where when it was time to make a jump into a career that was so new to me, I was able to put myself in an uncomfortable situation and be able to grow from that. So I think my advice to people listening here is don't always be focused on the destination, but the things along the journey that are getting you to that destination that will help influence you along the way.
Yeah, and you know, I think that is probably true for most as we reflect back, right? You have certain points in your career that you remember as a significant point, but really, it just seems to morph and play itself out and direct you on a path where your natural abilities just kind of gravitate towards, right? Those opportunities start to open the door. So it is, I think, a little of both, right? A lot of preparation, knowing what you need to know, right? Reaching out to people that can help you get there, but also some reflection, right? Of what are those things that have happened and how were they important? And then how can I leverage that? And then maybe pass that on to the next generation as well, right? Because we all know women have a great ability to problem solve, right? I mean, that's just in our DNA and our nature. We're running households, we're running children's lives. We are always challenged with things all the time. And how do we find the time and be able to get things done? How can we be in 3 places at once because somebody needs to go here and I've got to be on this phone call and all of these types of things? Just those inherent skills, you know, I think to Maggie's comment before, just bring a unique perspective to the table, and we shouldn't be afraid of that. We should just own it and embrace it. And so, you know, again, going back to what you know and having confidence, but, you know, pay it forward and reflect back. I think if you're doing all of those things, that helps round you out as a leader, because not only are you taking care of yourself, you're taking care of the people around you, and all those things help.
So I completely agree with Nancy and Katie. I think it is a journey. I think it's a lot of individual moments. I do remember one individual conversation very early on in my career, sitting on a plane with my boss at the time and commenting on how the coding team that did, actual computer engineering had to have a job that was much harder than what I was doing. And her conversation to me was, not necessarily, Maggie. They studied that in school. You studied accounting and something completely different. So I think her point was that those are just different languages. And if you wanted to go back and learn to be a computer engineer, you could. I never did that. I, kind of balanced that fine line between technology and customer service. But I think the point is that you can't judge someone else. You can't understand what their background is, or you can understand what their background is, but it all comes back to learning what the common language is so that you guys can work together, using that and your critical thinking skills for problem solving. And you don't need to assume that someone else's work is much harder than yours. It's just different.
Yeah, and one thing I kind of want to add here too is, like, I feel like when people think about influences and your journey, it's sometimes it just is painted as like such a positive like thing, and there's all these opportunities, and which one do I choose? And I'm going through all of this in a positive way, but I think that there have been a lot of things that didn't happen the way that I wanted them to, or even like negative interactions, relationships that I've had that have also influenced me to get to where I'm at today, that have really helped me to learn and grow from those. And that's what I've heard a lot from other people too, that are like entrepreneurs in tech and really have built something from the ground up, is you face a lot of rejection, and you have to build a lot of courage and a lot of grit and resilience to get to a place of leadership and to feel comfortable in those tough situations. And that takes time, right? So just keep that in mind too, when you go along your journey. Don't be discouraged by those negative experiences or those influences or things that didn't happen the way you wanted them to, because ultimately that's meant to get to where you're at today or where you're going.
Yeah, it's about failing with grace and learning, if you make a failure, learn from it.
Great. Thank you, guys. I love that, failing with grace. That brings us to our Q&A. We're getting quite a few questions, so we want to get to those and make sure we have time for those. Getting quite a few questions about work-life balance and how you guys go about it, whether it's with a spouse or a partner or with a child or your family. Do you women have any advice for those trying to balance work-life in this space?
So I could kind of jump in here, Kendall. So I think that as women in our career jobs, whether that be in tech or not, I think in order to show value, we've always tried to push ourselves to the front. So specifically in tech, where we saw those stats where it's majority male and we kind of have to force ourselves a seat at the table, one of the ways that I think comes naturally to force yourself a seat is to take everything on yourself. And I'm sure that many of you think about that at home too, when you're the one that has to do all the external work, or you're the one that has to go run around and pick up kids and take them to their various activities. When you take it all on, something's going to drop. So one of the things I encourage women as you're pushing forward in your career, especially in tech, is to surround yourself with people that can help you along the journey. You don't have to do it all yourself. And actually, as you build a team around you of people that you can trust, people that you can lean on, ask questions to, like you said, failing with grace. As we fail, we all lift ourselves up together. As you do that, the balancing act becomes so much easier, right? And so I found the same thing at home, right? So me and my husband, we have a son, we do the same thing. Who can do drop off today? Who can do pickup? And so it's asking for help, and knowing that you don't have to carry it all yourself will help eliminate the burden and allow you to succeed.
Yeah, Katie, I think that's so important, right? And not just, like you said, home, right? Because as women who's had children and home lives, and usually, managing all the household activities, and then you're managing all the work activities, it can be a lot. And to your point, we just naturally want to take it all on, right? We can do this, right? Either A, because we want to prove something, or B, it's just in our nature to take care of everything. Either way, it comes out to the same result, which is you can't do it all. And so not only, to your point, Katie, surrounding yourself with people that can help you on the home front, or not being afraid to ask, to divide and conquer with your significant other, but also the same thing on the work front, right? Really not only being able to trust yourself and what you know, but as you become leaders, right, to be able to trust your team and allow them to rise or fail just as you were allowed to rise and fail during your journey. So I just, just knowing that you can have a pulse on things at work, that you don't always have to be in the incremental details, that you build yourself up a team that you have confidence in, that can also take on the load, so that, you can have that balance between what you want to accomplish for your career and how you want to support and nurture your family.
Great, thank you both. We are also getting a lot of questions around building confidence, and this almost goes back to that question around imposter syndrome. Do you have any tips for people to build confidence maybe before a presentation or before a big meeting? Anything that maybe you've done that's helped you to even just get out of your own head before a big meeting?
I think the biggest thing for me, and I did it even before this meeting, and I sent an email to the thread, and I'm looking now to find it. Maybe Nancy, if you have the quote that I sent, you can speak to it. But I'm big into Googling inspirational quotes, right? So even before this meeting, I typed into Google what inspirational quotes for women in tech. And so just to get, like you said, Kendall, to get my head, out of my own head, right? And get in the right headspace, because sometimes I think we worry about, are all the periods in the right spot? Am I going to say all the right words, right? And instead you lose sight of why are we here? What is the mission? What is the vision that we're trying to accomplish? So Nancy, I don't know if I can't find it quickly, but I think you had mentioned it before the call.
Yeah, little girls with dreams become women with vision. And that was a great inspirational quote to kick us off. Yeah.
So I'm big into Googling, find the quotes that just lift your spirit. Sometimes you leave a meeting and you're like, that's not the way it wanted to go for me. And you just got to get your head out of that headspace, right? And give yourself some positive thoughts.
Yeah. Katie and I talked about this a little bit today, prep earlier, but, I am wearing jeans today, and in a remote environment, actually putting on the jeans as opposed to the leggings, that helps me to feel a little bit more prepared for something like this, helps me to get a little bit more pumped up. I practice different lighting for something like this. So I think just a little bit of that prep, especially in the remote virtual world we're living in, where you're going from virtual meeting to virtual meeting, sometimes taking a step back and be like, I need to pour my water into a real glass, and I need to do a little bit of this extra prep that makes me feel slightly more professional. I think that actually helped a lot just in boosting my confidence.
And then Alex, I think I heard you allude to this. This is certainly something that I do, is oftentimes I will write out what I intend to say, right? As a way to kind of prepare for what I think the questions are going to be, and kind of how I want to formulate my thoughts. Because oftentimes when you're on the spot, right, you can lose where your train of thought is going. So if you do a little bit of prep, it gives you something to lean back on. And you can even, have it up and review it as you're going through your presentation. Nobody really needs to know the things that you're using to support your professionalism, to make it sound like that you're super prepared and not reading off a script or whatever. But I personally, right, that art of writing it down, articulating it out, thinking it through ahead of time is super helpful for me to feel comfortable and kind of get rid of some of the jitters before you go through a presentation.
Great, thank you all. We're getting great feedback here as well, so keep it coming in, people from the audience. But just a note from someone listening in, such inspiration how you all are managing the double standards that really we face almost every day. And so I want to get to another question here. Speaking of maybe double standards. We have a question from someone who's trying to find more females to build on her team or to bring into her team. Do you all have any even personal experiences trying to recruit women in this space and how you went about doing that, or even how you balance that with an HR department?
Yeah, I can chime in here, Kendall, because I've been recruiting like crazy the past few months. My team is growing so fast. There have been a few experiences where when I've been interviewing women, I actually saw that they had the skills and the potential to go into more of a tech-focused role, but that's not initially the position that they were applying for. And so I think kind of what we were talking about earlier in the webinar, when you see the potential and the skills of a woman, and maybe she doesn't know that that's what she wants to do, or if it's even available as an option for her, really like intervening or kind of talking to her about a potential opportunity in tech can help to get more women on your team that may not just be interested because of what they know on their end of the relationship. So that's definitely advice I would have for anyone who's recruiting or has multiple positions open. Like, really be open-minded about who can go into what position and just look for those skills and that potential, and then you can kind of bring women in that would be able to fill that.
Yeah, and to that point, Alex, I think one thing, if you are on the end of hiring, to your point, look for things outside of traditional tech skill sets. But I also encourage people to take risks on people, right? Because sometimes you don't necessarily need the skills, you need the right person, and then the skills will come with it. We kind of talked a little bit about that before. And I think probably in all of our careers, someone has took a risk on us when we knew we weren't quite ready to make that jump, but we needed to push ourselves and they needed to pull us in. So I encourage people to take risks on people, because having the right people on your team at the end of the day is going to take you much further than necessarily having like the right resume built, or they've attended the right classes or have all the certificates. So really looking at people, I think, is going to be super helpful. And sometimes, you know, you're going to take that risk and it's not going to work out, but you're going to learn, you as a leader are going to learn from that as well.
And lastly, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Nancy.
Thanks, man. You know, you know, the person that's trying to make that leap, right? I mean, really, you know, we're talking about the skills that make you good in IT, and those are problem-solving skills, and, you know, being able to learn quickly. So take a look at what you've done in your past and translate that to those type of outcomes, right? And that's how you can help at least get your foot in the door, right? You don't necessarily have to have, you know, all of the classes, right? All of the certifications. You have to be a person that, as Katie mentioned, you know, has those skills, those softer skills, right? That are what's going to make you successful long-term. And so, you know, again, reach out to somebody and say, hey, I really want to do this, right? Can you help me articulate how what I've done in my past, you know, can translate into a successful IT career? There's plenty of folks that'll be happy to help.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say, I think it goes just one more level once you're actually hired, or you are the person hiring people. You want to make sure that you're catering kind of their growth and their feedback to whatever skills there are, and that applies for women and men and everything. And so I think it's really important that as you're looking to build a team in IT, you understand what are the various skill sets and how do they fit together. Because it's important that you have a diversity of knowledge and experience, just as much as a diversity of men and women.
That's great advice. Thank you all. I want to get to this next question about moving into a new leadership role. This is a question from an audience member. What did you do to become an integrated member of an established team, especially if it was predominantly male?
Yeah, happy to chime in here a little bit. my career field, cybersecurity, is predominantly male. I started out in the military, which was predominantly male. So it's just been kind of what you've had to deal with. And I think it just goes back to a lot of the threads that you heard today, really, learning and having confidence. And when you first get into those roles, really taking time to listen to people and trying to find out what those challenges are and how you're able to help and integrate yourself in and become a value add to that team. So, like you go into any new organization, right? You have to learn about the organization. It's anytime you go into a new leadership role, you have to learn about the team and how the team operates, right? You can't go in in a china shop, right? You just can't go in and say, I'm going to rip this all out and fix everything, right? It's an evolving process. And if you do that with listening first, I think you end up being a little more successful at being able to integrate yourself in.
Yeah. My experiences with joining the Janus leadership team back in the fall, I think are very much in line with those same skills. So I joined and was the first female on the leadership team. And it was interesting for me because the team was very open, and I didn't even think about it really, very open to my ideas and my experience. And I guess I made a couple quick wins for myself by trying to do a couple things that I knew I could succeed in right away. So was able to do that. And then, I really feel like that helped me to establish my role and my own confidence in myself.
Great. Thank you all. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Katie.
I was just going to say, I think that I agree with both Maggie and Nancy. I think just being able to listen and then pause before reacting. I think, again, going back to our comment about us as women trying to control everything and trying to make sure our voices are heard, sometimes just listening and then taking everything in and then formulating your response will go a long way. So as I've stepped into environments that are uncomfortable in a new leadership role, it's kind of looking at the events coming in, pausing and formulating my response to drive outcomes. So I think that can go a long way by just like taking a back seat in the beginning and looking at the environment that already exists and then taking in those environmental variables to drive change.
And then one last thing, both Maggie and Katie mentioned it, but it's following through, right? Determine what you can be successful at, get those quick wins, deliver when you say you're going to deliver, and that is how you build trust, right? And once you start building trust with the leadership team, then a lot of the concerns that you initially have kind of go by the wayside.
Thank you all. We're continuing to get some great feedback here in the Q&A. So thank you everyone for continuing to join in and sharing your thoughts on the panel. Another question I want to get to, Katie, you touched on this earlier in the presentation, talking about how tech is everywhere. We use it every day. Someone would like to know how you narrowed down exactly where in tech you were going to take your career, or if you have any advice on how to navigate the wide world that is tech.
That is such a great question. I'm thinking of my answer. Because just like I kind of mentioned before, I never would have thought I would be working with a team that builds robots, right? So, but I think it's this might sound cheesy, but you got to follow your heart, right? And so it's kind of going through the stages on that journey and understanding why you're there, right? And so I was recently at a coffee stand ordering coffee drive-through. My son was in the back. And as my coffee was brewing, the barista was kind of making small talk and saying, what are you doing today? I'm at work. What do you do for work? And my son, who's 5, chimed in the back and says, she builds bots. And then, of course, the person's like, what? What does that mean? And she was like, what do you do that for? And he chimed in again and said, she builds bots to help people, right? So I think that you have to follow your heart where your career journey takes you, and the type of tech you get into will just come naturally. I would never think I would be here, but I would never change it. And so again, it's those experiences along the way. And I think we have to stop trying to make it black and white, and really go back to what are the things that you want to solve, and what is the tech that will help you solve it. So that's kind of where my head's going with that question, Kendall.
Yeah, I love that personal story you shared. That's great. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to chime in for that question?
Yeah, I think it's true, right? My career was an evolution. It wasn't planned. It was through a series of opportunities. Sometimes, yes, I took on opportunities when, I felt like, boy, if I don't do this right, it's going to go away. Sometimes I let opportunities go away, right? Because it wasn't, as Katie mentioned, as cheesy as it sounds, right? It wasn't in my heart to go that route. So I would say trust your gut. It's going to help lead you on that path. And it is a journey, right? And some things are going to be successful, some things aren't. But at the end of the day, all of those experiences culminate to where you're going. And, as we mentioned, it's a journey. It's not a destination, right? It's not this black and white thing. None of us intended to do what we do, but all of us are very successful at doing it. And it's because we followed our heart.
Yeah,
and I think that's
women's intuition is a real thing, right?
Yeah. I was just going to say, I think the point of you don't have to pick a field within tech, right? You can start somewhere, see how that feels, see if that fits for you, and then morph. You don't have to make a final decision.
All right, well, we have just a few minutes left here, and there are really two questions I wanted to end on, both really surrounding resources for people to look into after this panel discussion. The first we'll start with, because this is something we had discussed previously before we hopped onto this panel discussion. Do you have any recommendations when it comes to books or webinars or videos, anything on YouTube, any resources that you'd encourage everyone to maybe take a look at when they need some inspiration, or even just after this webinar?
This isn't a perfect answer, but I will just throw out YouTube generally. Even earlier this year, I was looking into the difference between safe agile methodology and agile methodology, and trying to relearn those for myself so that I could have the right questions to ask our product team. And I spent, a Saturday watching 2 hours of YouTube videos on it, and it was incredibly helpful for me. So as I know that's not a perfect answer and not something that you can go look up immediately or we can send out, but just knowing that that is a technological platform that exists for you to really look up anything that might help you. Everything in so many different things are out there on YouTube. So I would just say, if there's something that you heard that you think is an important technology to learn about or an important methodology to learn about, just go ahead and look it up.
Yeah, and I think, to Maggie's point, there's just a plethora of things to learn on. And it really, I would encourage, like Maggie mentioned, what's your passion? What are you hearing? What is, is catching your attention? What might excite you? And just kind of explore that. And then, I would also, again, go back to look at folks on LinkedIn that are in that career field, and, connect with them and, send them a note and say, hey, I'm thinking about this career field and would really love some advice on resources that you would suggest. All of those things are for the taking, right? And it's just a matter of taking that first step and not being afraid of it. All
right, so the second one is also surrounding around resources. But this is more regarding any certifications that you think people interested in tech or healthcare tech should pursue, or even certain languages they should study, anything like that that you would recommend to someone starting out maybe more earlier in their career path.
You know, from a language standpoint, I would say learn scripting language, right? It doesn't go wrong on the healthcare IT tech side, and it doesn't go wrong on the cybersecurity side. And learning a language, you know, like Python or something like that is helpful because it does allow you to understand the intricacies and how things communicate, and understanding how things communicate can help you solve problems, or in my case, help you protect the things that solve problems. So really, you know, I'd say anything, there's so many ways to self-learn, free classes, you know, go to any of the For Dummies series books, right? Pick one up. And then the other thing I would say too, for those that are up and coming, embrace cloud. Everybody's going there, so learn about cloud engineering, whether that's AWS, Google, Azure, I don't care. You know, learn how to do the more cloud native type things. We hear about people making that transition to cloud, right? And they're usually doing a lift and shift, but really where it's going in the future is cloud native. So how do I make things talk using the resources of native AWS resources versus building a traditional SQL server, let's say, for databases. So, you know, I would say those are areas that would help.
Great, thank you. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate it. I think this was a great discussion from all of our panelists. And again, I would encourage our audience members to really seek everyone out who presented today on LinkedIn and connect. That's always very important for women in this field as well. So thank you all. Thank you to our panelists, and thank you for all who joined today. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.